The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to this online ISP forum for December 13th, 2013. Today we will be discussing success stories, accomplishments of people as a result of good planning. My name is Dan McCloy. I'm part of the team at OTAC that provides supports throughout Oregon on person-centered practices and the 24-hour comprehensive ISP planning process. We're glad you're able to join us today. This webinar is being brought to you by Oregon Technical Assistance Corporation. OTAC has been providing training and technical assistance to professionals and citizens concerned about intellectual and developmental disabilities since 1984. OTAC is available to answer 24-hour ISP process questions. If you have any questions or comments after today's forum, please reach us via our website, email, or telephone. Participants in today's forum can submit questions through the chat box on the webinar console anytime during the presentation. This webinar is being recorded to share with others who weren't able to attend live today. Your telephones and microphones have been muted for this call. The recording of today's forum will be posted later today on OTAC's website. Today, Aniko Adani from the Individual Support Planning team here at OTAC will be talking about stories of success. She will be joined by Alan Lytle and Sherry Stephen from the OTAC team in sharing stories as well as discussing with our featured guest how his goals were accomplished by planning with a team. We'll learn about his experiences throughout the planning process and share some helpful tips to consider when planning with people, as well as a tool that can help you get the most out of your own stories of success. So I want to thank you again for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to Aniko.
Hello, and welcome to our Friday the 13th broadcast. We are going to be talking about success stories and accomplishing goals, just like Dan said. We will be sharing some stories of success. We will be talking firsthand about one story that is still unfolding, and also we have a few stories that were shared to us from teams across the state. So we will be sharing stories of success from the Oregon community. Also, we'll be sharing some tips for planning that we have learned from some of these stories, and then we will talk about how to maximize a story's effects when we tell them. So basically, we'll be sharing a tool to help you get more out of telling your own stories at the end. And all of everything we share will be able to be downloaded later as well. So why do we share stories? Well, really lots of reasons. So it's the end of the year, so we're reflecting on celebrating on what we've accomplished, celebrating on what we've learned. Success can take on so many forms, and it's important to reflect on all the positive things that were accomplished, especially since all of us in our daily work and lives are bombarded by problems. It's just really nice to remember and focus on all the successes that are happening all the time. Also, we can share stories with each other, effectively shared stories with the team, the board, funders, the community, families, customers. Really, the list goes on of who can benefit from sharing stories of success. When we tell stories effectively and we're able to share them effectively, they can teach us, they can empower, they can motivate, and really just show people what great things are happening in our lives, with people we support, in our organizations, anywhere. So the first story that we're sharing today comes to us from Partners in Community Living, and it is Chris's story, and you see pictures of Chris, and this story is called Buttons. So I'm going to read it to you. It's given to us by John's story, so this is in John's words to share their experiences together in what is titled Buttons. I met Chris in the summer of 2010 as a lead in his transition to a new home and new opportunities. My first impression of him was a person of great personality, but also extremely task-driven. I took a look at Chris's personal information to get a better sense of what made him tick and dug into his background, which was vague at best. There was a single piece of paper which stated very basically likes and dislikes, a snappy dresser, had a sense of humor, and didn't like being told no. I thought, this sounds a lot like me, and like most people I know, in fact. Could this be generic, I thought? As Chris's behaviors continued to spiral along the mission became clear to find out what drives him in order to help and understand him. For this to work, we first needed to take a look at the differences between him and I to determine what was missing for Chris. It was believed at the time that Chris had no living relatives and an unclear past, which became the major difference from Chris to the rest of us. Chris seemed to have only two obsessions, his buttons and his footlocker with records which he protected vigorously. In fact, Chris had many jobs over the years, pressing buttons of campaigns and fundraising events, always asking for buttons, yet no matter the hundreds he had in his collection, nor the hundreds he made, Chris would only be detoured for a moment and then back to his obsession, leading to his majority of behaviors with really no way to satisfy his need. What I learned from this was that Chris had no constant. This was the difference between us. We as people are defined, identified, and evaluated by our loved ones and peers, and Chris had none. The mission was clear, to find Chris's constant, but where to start? I decided to take a look at some person-centered tools I learned from a person-centered committee provided by PCL and made a modification of a tool which was used to identify Chris's relationships in 4 categories: family, friends, community, home, both close and distant. With this information, we could compare Chris to himself quarterly to determine if his numbers have gone up or down, and if this is as a result of Chris or a staffing pattern that we needed to change. As we looked over the categories, I started with what I could control, which was community. Chris went to his first dance, and while there, we bumped into an old staff of his from years prior, who I drew close to, as this was the best chance I had to get information about Chris's past, and she did not disappoint. She became an advocate for Chris, and he loved her being around. I was given lots of information about the previous places he lived, and with that, it led me to the next place and the next staff again and again until one day I found myself in an archive looking at an original ISP. This 5-inch book had it all, and to my surprise, shortly into the book, I see it. A woman's name is listed as sister, and my heart sinks. I finally found it. After some searching, I locate her, sadly no more than 1 hour away, his entire life. I nervously make the call when a gentle-voiced woman answers and I introduce myself. After a brief pause, she begins to cry. She's overwhelmed. The decision for a family reunion was in order, for Chris's family was most certainly not deceased, but very much alive. The date is set, and we get ready to leave. New pair of clothes and a button as usual, and we are on our way. Nervously, I entered with Chris, awaiting the outcome of almost 3 years of work and searching. Never having met before, I am unsure of who to look for and unprepared for what I was about to witness. An elderly woman stands from the back of the room about 40 years apart, and they see one another. Chris and his sister gravitate toward one another. After a long embrace and standing face to face, she says, "I know you." With a satisfied smile I have never seen, Chris replies, "Yes, you're my baby sister, Buttons." I am overwhelmed as 4 decades of what he has been searching for is found, and I now understand who he is and the obsessions of Buttons being not an object but a person. After a long talk with Chris's sister, I am to discover his past. Born in January of 1954, Chris had 8 brothers and 3 sisters. His mother, stricken with terminal cancer, and Chris with the German flu at the age of 3, is taken by the state as his father is seen unfit to raise such a vast family alone with a special needs child. Chris was institutionalized at the age of 5 and lost for the next 40 years. Chris's mother passed, then shortly his father, as I am told he died of a broken heart, mourning the loss of his wife and baby boy. Chris would receive a keepsake wheeled from his father, a footlocker containing over 50 vinyl records of his dad's collection. The meeting is over, and Chris and I walk away, changed men forever. Since reuniting of Chris to Buttons, we have continued to improve the quality of his life. The numbers of his PCT have tripled, if not more. Chris has many friends and relationships, including a girlfriend, as well as many community partners. We have not seen behaviors from Chris in a very long time. As a result of the data collected during this time, we have found a way to help Chris, a man with dementia, remember some good memories and make new ones, which have improved his speech patterns, his gait, and his overall quality of life. It has been an absolute pleasure to be a part of it, and to chase the #1 dream of this man's life. Sometimes dreams do come true when you are surrounded by those who are willing to help you chase them. A big thanks to the Summer Wind team for all their help and support over the years. We couldn't have done it without you. Sincerely, John Story. So as we hear and we can see, Chris's story is extremely impactful and powerful. So you could see from these pictures that his life is now full of people and relationships, where at first he had none. And really it just started with the tools just to see how does his relationships compare to my relationships. Support staff in his life were huge in leading the way to discover new information and new people all along the way who just led really from one step to another. So being creative and not giving up is certainly something that we saw in this story. And just that human aspect of people just really, once that people were contacted, they just came out of the woodwork. And there were lots of people who cared to share and to help trace back Chris's life from the past. And it turned out there was lots of available resources too. So using available archives and just really following up thread by thread and person by person is what made this happen and really transformed this man's life. Another thing that I want to mention that was really stuck out for me was that focusing on what was possible and within the team's control was really important. It would have been easy to feel overwhelmed and at loss and just not even start this process, but they picked something that they could do and just started, and I think it was phenomenal. Later on in the follow-up email, there's a video that accompanies this story, so I definitely encourage everyone to take a look at that because it's really something to see. The next story that we're going to be talking about comes to us from Pete. Pete is a young man who lives in Eugene, Oregon. He's a people planning together trainer, and those people who know him describe him as very motivated. He's determined. He's very intelligent and a charismatic man, just basically a really cool guy. Pete uses a communication device to speak his words for him. He types and is a very effective and powerful communicator. Pete prepared his own story for us, and because he could not be here with us today, Alan Lytle will read it for him.
This is Pete's
Alan?
story. He says, I was invited to Dartmouth College to give a speech on how I live with cerebral palsy. It took 3 days of planning to figure out what I was going to say and to go through all my pictures to figure out which ones I wanted to bring. I wanted to show pictures of all the different boards I've used over time to get to where I am now. Next, I had to find 2 people to help me get there. Those 2 people turned out to be my staff, Sheila, and my friend, Irv. For Sheila to be able to come, we had to have her not work for 3 weeks to save up her hours for the trip. My staff helped me plan out how we would get there and where we would stay. We decided by plane would be the best route since it was the fastest and Dartmouth was paying for all the expenses. When we arrived, we walked into our hotel room to find a couple already laying in our bed. We went back downstairs to tell the hotel staff about the situation, but they were unable to help us since they were all booked up. We ended up having to go to a completely different hotel. The next day was the day of the speech. We went down to the college expecting to do the speech in front of college professors and their students, but what the audience turned out to be was some college professors and children with disabilities and their parents. 3 days of preparation turned out not to be enough. The parents were especially interested in the way that I learned to communicate, which was understandable considering the fact that many of their children had yet to find a way of communicating themselves. However, they asked more questions than I was prepared to answer, which ended up giving them more of a first-hand view of how my board worked, since the majority of my speech was prepared in advance and Sheila had read it to them. In the end, it was a really rewarding experience. For me, knowing that I was helping a future generation of children with disabilities to live more quality lives and be happy, and for them to see someone who has lived their whole life with a disability and has been able to overcome it and be the person he wants to be.
Thank you. So Pete's story there's some things that we could take away from it. It is an awesome opportunity that he had, and the team had to really be flexible and work together for him to pull it off. So they saved staff hours so that Pete could have assistance with, traveling, and also to plan out. It's a big, big trip. And as we heard, there were some things that were definitely unexpected that they overcame together. Some of the details are just not possible to know. If you walk in your hotel room and somebody's already laying in the bed, what do you do? So it took some quick thinking for them to really overcome some of the things. But they really worked together, and not only with each other, but also Pete. So one thing that I have taken away from even just talking with Pete and his team in putting this together is that Pete is really the central driver of what happens. So he's involved in all of the decisions, and he really makes all the decisions. So he's the central person. So when things weren't going well, they consulted with Pete on what he wanted to do, and that is what really made it happen. And Pete was clearly driven to see this through. So what an amazing opportunity. As a result, Pete shared with me that his goal is to continue speaking professionally, and so this was a big stepping stone for him to reach a number of people and really further his career in that way. And also he got to experience the Atlantic Ocean, which was also a really cool experience for him. So thank you to Pete and the team for sharing that story. Up next, we are joined by Eddie Plord. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Hi, Eddie. Hi.
Hi.
And we have Sherry Stephen, and we are here to talk about Eddie's story of success and something that he is planning with the team that is really big. So, Eddie, tell us about what big goal that you are working on.
Planning of weddings.
Awesome. So you are planning a wedding, and
Yes.
so you shared with us you have a date set for your wedding, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what made you decide that you wanted to get married? Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to be with somebody.
Okay.
I want to be with Jennifer DeVello for the rest of my life.
So Jen is your fiance?
Yes.
Awesome. So when is the big day?
June 21st of next year,
It's coming up.
2014.
Yeah.
It's coming up real soon.
It is coming up real soon. Could you tell us a little bit about how you proposed or any of that story?
I proposed last Christmas to Jen and that, and it's been a year this Christmas that I proposed to Jen,
Okay.
and I did it right in front of her parents
You are a brave man.
on both knees.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome. So I understand that some people are helping you both to plan your wedding.
Sherry is helping.
Sherry is helping?
Yes.
Okay. So how are people helping you plan for your wedding?
Sherry is helping us plan our wedding with writing information down for me and Jen to check into
Okay.
and get invitations and save the date cards and that.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. So what are some of the things that are, you mentioned earlier that you got assignments. Is that?
Yes, we have assignments.
So what are some of your
Checking out
assignments?
places to have our wedding
Okay.
and all that.
Okay. So what are some of your assignments?
My assignment was to check out some places to have our wedding in Kaiser or Salem area, like the Mission Mill, and I found a spot at the City of Kaiser City Hall to have our wedding. And I gave the information to Jen to take home to fill out the papers.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys are kind of, there's a lot of teamwork going on.
Yes.
It sounds like, yeah. Sherry, could you tell us a little bit about some of the planning process that you guys are all doing together?
Yeah, actually, the first thing that we did was we actually did a planning party or a planning meeting, and that included Mom, Dad, Jen, Eddie, me, Deborah, some people that know Eddie and Jen pretty well. And that was kind of like our kickoff. When we did our little planning meeting, it kind of identified some things that not only that needed to be done, but the things that Eddie and Jen wanted to consider in what directions to go with different things. So it helped us better understand what it was that they were looking at and what their vision was. Once we got some of that together, Eddie, Jen, and I agreed to meet every so often, and in between each meeting we gathered some assignments for each of us to do by the time we came back together. For instance, one of the very first things that we did was pull together what were the people that they wanted to invite, how many people, and who those people were, because one of the first things that we needed to do was save the date cards and prepare that, and just talk about all the things that happen within a wedding, and then figure out how many months or how many weeks in advance do we need to start preparing for that. So we would cut it up in kind of like a pie form, and each slice of the pie would be taken care of during each meeting. So we kind of like spread it out depending on whether it was 6 months that we needed to start preparing or whether it was just a couple weeks prior to. So we kind of assigned different things during that each stage.
Okay.
And that's been very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. So it's not so overwhelming. We're just taking small bites each time we meet.
Yeah. Well, planning a wedding is certainly a really big job. So how has that been working for you, Eddie, to have it be pieces at a time?
It's been good.
It's been good.
For Sherry's help.
Yeah.
And Jen's help.
So do you guys, how often do you meet to talk about?
We're going to meet in January again.
Okay.
Yeah, we meet probably about once a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As we get closer, it probably will be more often, but right now we've been meeting once a month. But we've excluded December because of the holidays and how busy everyone is. So.
Yeah. Okay. So the other part of planning a wedding is that it could be pretty expensive. So Eddie, tell us a little bit about that part, saving money and just that piece of the wedding planning. How is that going?
It's hard to save money.
It is. So how are people helping you and supporting you in saving your money?
Not very helpful.
It's not very helpful.
Well, we do have something, Eddie. We've been reaching out to friends and coworkers that have certain specialties that they are more than welcome. They're more than open to providing some things, such as what are some of the things that we have some of our friends kind of taking the lead on for us, Eddie?
Music.
Music, yes. We have someone who's willing to do the DJing, which is great. Yes. The pastor of your church, yes. Deborah for flowers, because she's a flower arranger. Dan, who's helping us with the videotaping and pictures. So yeah, we have a bunch of people behind us providing a lot of things, but there's still a lot of things to consider, and it's going to be a little bit, affecting our financial, goal to stay under. So
It's going to be costly.
It is going to be costly. It sounds like you guys are really pulling together from the community. It sounds like you have an amazing circle of people that are helping you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I understand, Eddie, that you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this is definitely where having lots of friends and family and a group of supporters that are willing to help and provide you with the assistance that you need.
And Eddie, I understand that you've actually paid off the wedding ring, or the
the wedding ring.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I paid that off my $92 that I got when I taught people plan together last time.
Okay. So that's awesome. So
I paid off the ring and the wedding ring.
Did anyone help you budget it, or?
No, my payee I told my payee what I wanted to do with the money.
Okay.
I wanted to pay off the wedding ring and get it.
So it is free and clear.
Yes.
That is great. Okay. So it does sound like you guys are doing awesome and doing all the plans. Have there been any times when maybe things weren't going so well, or if you ran into some challenges? Eddie,
No.
What do you think? No, it's been smooth sailing?
It's been smooth sailing.
Okay.
Just a couple of things that, they've been working really, really well together and compromising, and it's huge. Eddie he wanted to be an outdoor wedding, and Jen was very fearful of the weather because she really doesn't like rain. So they had some conversation around that and compromised and got the place, and they both agreed upon the place. So, doing things like that, they've been really, really good about considering what the other person's perspective is and considering that and making, agreements based on both of their inputs. So I've been really very grateful to be able to work with such an easy group to just be so flexible and to compromise and things like that. But so far we really haven't come across anything that was major but we still have a long road to go, so I'm hoping things continue to be so smooth.
Definitely. And Eddie, tell us a little bit about when you and Jen don't agree on a detail. How do you two work it out?
We talk about it.
You talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. How does that go?
We compromise.
You compromise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll kind of state the things that are important to Eddie based on that subject, and then the important things that are important to Jen, and then they kind of decide based on that. Just making it very clear as to the reason why, this is not working for Jen, or this is not working for Eddie, or, this is going to be a difficult thing, but we have these other options. And just kind of corralling the information for them, and then they kind of toss things up and around until they figure out what direction that they want to go. So I think that it's important that not only do they know that what's not working for them, but why it's not working for them, so that, they can kind of base that on how crucial, or if they're willing to compromise. Something to do with rain. Jen does not like rain. She doesn't like being in the rain. She doesn't like anything about it. So she's very stern about that. So if it happened to rain on her wedding day and they had the wedding outside, it would just be a major, catastrophe for her, because she really does not like the rain. So having it indoors was much more, and they talked about having their vows and who would be writing them, or whether they would be doing the the traditionals, and Eddie had talked about writing the vows, but then they decided that it was probably better if they had the traditionals, based on both of their interests and what was important to them. So I think just pointing out what's important to them and why it's important to them helps them understand what's all at risk and what's all available. So
those are amazing tips for, I think, for even just in any time. It sounds like that there is a disagreement, that when we're planning something as big as that, is just to really dig in and find out why the disagreement is happening, and not just try to smooth it over. So that's
right. And I think a huge piece of it is that Eddie and Jen trust me to consider what's important to them. Does that make sense? So I don't run over them. I tell them this is better for you because I know better. They trust me to be able to guide them in that direction, in that way, that they make the decisions, but I give them what's the possibilities and you know why things are important to each other. So yeah, I think
like
trust is huge.
Yes.
Yeah. So Eddie, do you have any advice for other people who are planning a big wedding?
I think advice would be to just take it in consideration. It's really expensive to have a wedding, but just plan as you go.
Yeah, it sounds like that was.
Yeah.
Really
I was waiting for you, Eddie, to say call Sherry, and then I was going to cringe.
Call Sherry for a wedding planner.
There you go.
No. No.
That's too funny.
Sherry will charge interest.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry and Eddie, for sharing your story with us. And definitely we look forward to seeing pictures of your wedding and hearing all about it after June. So thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
So just to recap just a little bit, so some of the things that we can take away from chatting with Eddie and Sherry is that regular meetings and the assignments help to keep the team on track. So it was easier to see what needed to be done next, and focusing on immediate next steps kept things on track, and it kept things from to keep happening and from becoming too overwhelming. Certainly, as anyone who has planned a wedding or participated in one knows that it's a huge, huge task, and it can quickly become overwhelming. So splitting it into manageable pieces was key. And also something that Eddie and I have been talking about is just to talk it out. There's a lot of, everyone has their own views of what should happen and the dreams, and it's a lot of compromises and talking it out. So these 3 points are really striking takeaways from this story of Eddie. So looking back on just the stories that we shared today so far, the tips for success that we could take away for tips for successful planning is to meet regularly and to stay on track. So celebrating the successes as they happen, and not waiting until the whole entire thing is done. But in Eddie's example, in his story, celebrating when something is accomplished, like a venue is found, so that is definitely enough cause to celebrate that assignment getting done and getting closer to the big goal. And of course, the big celebration will happen then. When things don't go well, it's very important to involve the person and the team to figure out how to proceed. So talking it out. We saw with Pete, it was very important that he gets to make the decisions. Thinking about Chris and involving him and the people in his life, and as that group grew, talking things out and figuring out together was a really key element. Flexibility is just key. It's probably one of the most resounding themes that we've heard today so far, the support and the commitment of people who care, and being flexible when things don't quite go the way they're supposed to. Focusing on next steps and what is possible is something that we first heard with Chris. So lots of things are out of our control, but there's usually something that we can do, and starting with that is empowering, and it can put things into motion. Using some tools and applying it to ourselves first, and to see how it compares to the people that we support. That is something that we talk some about, but I think is a really important component, because sometimes we get lost in the day-to-day, just the details of the job and the jargon, and we lose sense of really the person first. And so when we do something like a relationship map and compare it to our own, we can really see where maybe we should be focusing, where we can go. Don't assume that what we've always known has been right, so don't be afraid to ask. In Chris's instance, it was believed that he had no family and they were all deceased, and it turned out to be very much the opposite. So going on what was possible and just not giving up right off the bat, and asking questions and being resourceful and involving those who care and are available is something that is another thing that can help us be more successful when we plan. And also using available resources. There are a lot of resources out there in the community, so it's just a matter of start looking. It's stepping outside of our own boxes. So all of these are tips for successful planning that were shared through these stories that we are hearing today, and definitely want to say thank you for the people who have helped to make this possible so far. So telling our own story is success. We, in the beginning, mentioned why do we tell stories. So stories can be shared with all sorts of people, with potential customers, with current customers, with funding agencies, with hopeful funders, the board, the community, our friends and family, just anybody to help us inspire and share and empower. So a good story, when we tell stories, it needs to have a purpose. So a good story should either instruct us, inspire us, or inform us of something. And it needs to have a focused person. So, for example, let me tell you about so-and-so is a great way to start a story, but there always needs to be a person in the middle of a good story. And it's just simple. And we're going to see a tool in just a minute. But it's very, very simple, but when we break it down like this, it makes sense. So how to tell and how to get the most out of telling stories. So we need to have a clear beginning that introduces the person and the issue, and then what happened? What is happening? What is the issue? What is the conflict? And then what people did to address it. And it needs to have an end. We can't be left with a cliffhanger. If we want an effective story that really accomplishes its purpose of instructing, inspiring, or informing, we need to have it be able to be wrapped up. And ideally, a good story we should be able to tell quickly. So I wanted to show you guys a tool that basically just has all of these. And this could look like anything. This is not something that is a form that you have to fill out. But this is just a good framework for telling your story in 1 minute. If we can tell a great story that has the beginning, a middle, and an end, and has a purpose and a person, then we are able to do our job. So I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to use this framework and to share Laura's story. So this story comes to us from Riverside, and this is Laura. And Laura so this is written, it's coming from Erica Sherlock, was gracious enough to contribute this story to us. So let me tell you about Laura. Laura is a lady that I just started to work with this summer. I don't know her very well yet, but she has a laugh that is contagious. And as you can see by this picture, she is a bright, lovely person that just has a smile that goes a mile. So she has refused to participate in her own planning process for several years now. And in the past, she has completely shut down when she was asked to contribute. And in fact, Laura didn't want to come to meetings. So I saw that she had no vocational goals last year and really just couldn't believe it. Her preferred support staff brought the PSW along with them on every activity over the last several months. And so we started to fill out with Laura through conversations rather than questions and answers. They spent hours with Laura in fun, casual settings. They were working on crafts, horseback riding, shopping, the whole time gathering information for her ISP. And then they sat down together and went over the information they had gathered, and Laura was amazed. She became really excited about the action plans that they drafted together and even provided input willingly and happily when she realized that she didn't have to do it with all the pressure of her team at the meeting. Laura, at the end, she still did not participate in her actual ISP meeting, but she developed all of her own goals herself and is taking ownership of them now. So that certainly is success. And it's a small but mighty victory. So that's Laura's story. So as you can see it could be fast, and it could really make an impression and just really tell you a lot of things about that. So the things that we can pull out of that is that the team got creative, and they didn't just shut the book and walk away. They decided to just go ahead and have conversations rather than the question and answer meeting that really turned Laura off, and they figured out what worked for her and went with that. And she's, from this picture anyways, looking very happy and is good. So here are the resources and the stories from today. So just want to remind you guys that if you would like, the Pete's speech can be downloaded. Thank you, Pete, for that. And also there's a video about Chris's story buttons that these will be included in the follow-up email to this webinar, and I believe also able to be accessed through the OTAC website later on. But you can find some more information about telling great stories and also on some of the tools at the learning community. And also I encourage you to look at the onepageprofiles.wordpress.com. It has some amazing stories of success with planning with people, as well as some great ideas of inspiration and how to get motivated. And a copy of the tool that we showed about telling 1-minute stories will also be included in the follow-up email. So if you would like to use that, or you could make your own, is completely flexible. So just wanted to say thank you to Eddie for joining us, and Sherry as well for joining us, and Alan for helping us read Pete's story. And be sure to attend our next online ISP forum, and that is going to be next Friday, December 18th, so a week from today. I'm sorry, I think that would be Wednesday. Anyway, working with a nurse on the ISP team with Alan Lytle and Teresa Rittner, who is the registered nurse. So definitely join us for that, and have a happy holiday season.
All right, everyone, just a quick reminder that this webinar has been recorded, and we will post it online by Monday at www.otac.org/ISP/forum for you to watch and share with others. At the end of this webinar, a quick survey is going to pop up. If you could take just a moment to answer those questions, we sure would appreciate it, because we value your feedback. So on behalf of the ISP and Person-Centered Practices team at OTAC, thank you, and have a great weekend. Goodbye, everyone.